Okay, so we are going to get started here. I apologize in advance for the dinging, if you can hear it, of people joining the meeting. We're trying to figure out how to get that to turn off. So my name is Astrid Quas. I'm the Director of Capital and Expense Budget at the Office of Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. I'm also joined here by my colleague, Zenaida Rodriguez, who has recently joined our team as a budget associate. On behalf of our office, we'd like to thank you all for joining today's fiscal year 25 capital funding information session. So in today's session, I'll be giving a presentation providing a general overview of the capital funding process and information on how to apply for capital funding from our office. I am also joined here by Jonathan Seltzer and Brian McKinn from the School Construction Authority's capital management team. The SCA, as most of you might know, manages all of the school capital projects. They'll also be given a presentation during the session to provide you all with additional context on the capital process and what happens after your school receives a capital allocation from our office. The session is also going to include a Q&A portion at the end of the presentations. And we will be answering some of the questions that were flagged for us in your RSVPs, as well as allowing you all to ask any questions that may come up during the presentation. Please also feel free to drop in anything into any questions into the chat box. We're going to do our best to answer all of the questions. However, we also want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. So we're going to aim to still end the session by 2 p.m. But we will be sending out an FAQ to everyone that is in attendance after the session with answers to all the questions. And today's session is being recorded, so smile. And it will be made available to everyone via our office's website. So if you cannot capture all the information today, not to worry. Let me just turn off my camera really quickly here. Okay. Okay, so I am going to begin with just an overview of the capital funding program. So as mandated by Section 211 and 249 of the New York City Charter, borough presidents are provided with an annual allocation of capital funding that they can appropriate to eligible projects at the borough president's discretion. Most eligible and funded projects are usually run either by not-for-profit organizations, other city agencies, and of course, educational institutions. Most of these projects provide infrastructure improvements across our borough, such as like housing developments, hospital, parks, etc. But historically, most of the projects for which our office both receives capital applications and have also funded have been public schools. And just to give you guys a little history of what's happened in the last 2 years since Borough President Reynoso came into office. So as some, if not most of you may already know, in his first year of office, Borough President Reynoso allocated his entire capital funding budget for fiscal year 23 to the 3 Brooklyn public hospitals to specifically support capital improvements to their maternity units. This decision, which is actually the first time that any borough president allocates all of their capital funding to just one cause, was made as part of his maternal health initiative to combat maternal mortality amongst birthing people of color. So Coney Island was awarded $18.5 million to support an integrated women's health unit. Woodhull Hospital, $11 million for renovations to their labor and birthing suites, and Kings County, $15.6 million for renovations to their mother, baby, and NICU units. For the fiscal year 24 capital cycle, capital funding was allocated in the more traditional way of awarding funding, which is across different projects, falling into the categories that are displayed, and across different entities and agencies, and of course, schools. So as you can see, most of the applications that we received were from educational institutions, and a little over a quarter of the total capital funding that the board president awarded was allocated to schools. So education and being able to support our Brooklyn schools is a priority for the borough president. And so we want to make sure that all the schools have all the necessary tools and information in order to access this funding. So when considering your fiscal year 25 capital project, it's important to understand what the eligibility requirements are in order to best prepare. Most importantly, all public schools, regardless of grade levels, are eligible for capital funding. which is also known as Reso-A funding for schools. I know the terms are used interchangeably. With the exception of charter schools, which have a little bit of a different process, which I can discuss a little later. But these guidelines, eligibility requirements are also going to be discussed in a little bit more detail during the SCA's portion. So I'll just give like a general overview. So first off, all projects have to meet a minimum cost of $50,000. Capital construction projects must provide a permanent enhancement to the facility. Most of these projects usually include build out of science labs, renovations to gyms, auditoriums, cafeterias, and playgrounds, just to name a few. Schools can also apply for funding to be used for the purchase of equipment and other technology. Any equipment that's purchased with capital funds must have a lifespan of 3 years. And some examples of typically funded technology projects include desktops, laptops, smart boards, iPads, and other types of tablets. There are, of course, some projects and items which have come to us that are not eligible for capital funding. And these, of course, include library books, loose classroom furniture, photocopiers, and that also includes toners or other tech-based supplies. Window air conditioning units, which I know a lot of schools have inquired about, are not capitally eligible. And of course, operational expenses that include or support programs for students such as after school, extracurricular, software, and of course, no staffing costs are eligible. So for fiscal year 25, what does the application process look like? All schools should begin with the capital process by developing a project scope. And developing the scope, the schools need to know what it is they will be asking the borough president to fund. And we will ask that details of your request be provided in your application. Once a scope is determined, the next step would be to establish what the cost is, so to make sure that it aligns with the amount of funding that's being requested from our office. To obtain the most accurate cost estimate, we highly encourage every school to first contact the school construction authority. We'll have their contact information made available to all of you, both at the end of the presentation and of course on our website. So after the school has obtained a quote from the SCA, an application should be submitted. We will have an application, which we're calling the BP Reynoso Fiscal Year 25 Capital Funding Application. And that link will be made available on our website during the first week of January 2024. It is important that all the questions that are asked on the application are answered completely, correctly, and just as requested on the application. Unfortunately, we did have some schools in the prior year that were deemed ineligible because of incomplete or missing information on their applications. The questions are generally school information, contact information. We want to make sure that all that is typed in correctly because we do reach out to you with any questions as we're reviewing applications. And of course, if your school is awarded any funding, we want to make sure that we're sending the award letters out and that you guys are receiving them. You'll ask for the cost of your project and the amount of funding that is being requested from our office. We also want to encourage all schools to please also reach out to their local council members' offices for information on their capital process. Our application, although we do ask the question of how much funding you are requesting to the council members, it does not substitute their application. And last year we did partner with council members for co-funding certain projects. And so we want to make sure that no schools miss out on funding because they either missed out on applying to submitting our application and or submitting an application to their council members' offices. So once an application is submitted, either Sanayada or myself will reach out with any questions we may have. Over the course of a few weeks, the VP reviews applications, selects projects for funding. I am aware that some schools have already asked if the VP has any funding priorities for this fiscal year. And the answer to that is we do not have a particular area of focus for the year. But similar to last year, he will be looking to spread funding across all districts. We are working with the SEA on some larger scale initiatives for future years, but we do want to encourage all the schools to prioritize what their needs are and submit their applications. If you are submitting multiple requests for the same school, which we do accept, we do ask that you please submit each request as a separate application, noting, of course, the project that has the highest priority. So, for example, if you're requesting a hydroponic classroom and smart boards, one application should be submitted for the classroom renovation, and a second application should be submitted for the smart boards. And after the adoption of the fiscal year 25 New York City budget, award letters are going to be emailed to all the schools sometime between July and early August. And then within 6 months, the SCA will reach out to begin the project planning process. Some additional information. So our application, as I mentioned earlier, will be made available on our website, brooklynbp.nyc.gov. We're aiming for January 2nd, but any date during that week. The deadline to submit an application to our office is February 22nd, 2024 by close of business. I do want to emphasize that this is a hard deadline, so schools should aim to submit their applications maybe a few days prior to allow for any troubleshooting should any issues arise. For schools that are requesting funding from both our office and council, you must have applied to both offices by the deadline listed here, which is February 22nd. Now, first, if there's any schools here that are going to be requesting funding from council only and missed our deadline to apply to our office, the deadline to apply with your council member is March 21st, 2024. For charter schools that are interested in capital funding for non-technology projects, you must also submit a CAP grant application in addition to the borough president application. And you can please reach out to me separately about that. I'm happy to discuss that, that process in a bit more detail with you directly. And lastly, private schools are not eligible for this funding unless 100% of the students are students that have disabilities. So again, any questions, please reach out to the budget team via our funding email address. And I've listed here also the contact information for our SDA representatives, which will be shared again later in the session and on our website as well. So I will now turn this over to Jonathan at the SDA to give you some additional factors to consider when you're pursuing capital funding.
Great. Great. Thank you, Astrid. We would like to thank the Borough President's Office for convening this meeting, and we welcome all the principals and school staff for joining this meeting as well. My name is John Seltzer. I'm also joined by my colleague, Brian McGinn. We are from the Reso A team at the School Construction Authority. As Astrid mentioned earlier, at the end of the presentation, we will open up the discussion for questions. Please put your questions in the chat and we will address them. For questions related to a specific project, please reach out to us directly after the presentation. Our emails will be provided in the PowerPoint, which will be disseminated after this presentation. We will now provide an overview of the Reso A grant program. Just one moment. All right. So a little bit about the School Construction Authority, who we are. The School Construction Authority's mission is to design and construct safe and attractive, environmentally sound public schools for children throughout many of the communities of New York City. We are dedicated to building and modernizing schools in a responsible, cost-effective manner while achieving the highest standards of excellence in safety, quality, and integrity. A little bit about participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is a democratic process in which community members directly decide how to spend part of the Reso A capital grant. Participatory budgeting, also known as PB, is not an additional funding stream. Reso A awards are often inclusive of the PB projects selected. Council members and borough presidents can use PB budgeting to decide how to spend a certain amount of their Reso A capital discretionary funding. As you'll see on the graph, largely 75% of the grants that we receive are just through the Reso A program, and then approximately 25% are specifically earmarked for PB, which is also included in Reso A. Some of the typical projects that are funded by schools are listed in this slide. Some of those include athletic fields such as turf and track renovation, gymnasium upgrades. Schools will either upgrade the flooring, maybe they'll upgrade the bleachers, as well as basketball hoops. We also see that some schools fund science labs. Science labs can range from just strictly a renovation to an actual build out of a new science lab, and we provide some of those ranges in a later slide. Schools may also opt into just funding a hydroponics lab, which is facilitated through Sunworks. We work in partnership with Sunworks on that. Some of the other type of projects are auditorium renovations. This could be a seat replacement, an audio-visual upgrade, complete overhaul of the auditorium itself, as well as bathrooms, and then supplemental cooling in public assembly spaces. Capital eligibility requirements. So starting in fiscal year 2021, all grants must be at minimum $50,000 or more. Capital construction projects must provide a permanent enhancement to the actual facility. So this is physical construction, or it can be technology rather. All equipment must have a minimum lifespan of 5 years, and technology grants must have a minimum lifespan of 3 years or more. And some examples of some of the technologies that schools choose to fund are smart boards, laptops, desktops, and STEM cards, A+ STEM cards. Projects that are not capitally eligible for the Reso A grant program, and Ashley touched on this a little bit. Window air conditioning units, we do get this request a lot. However, individual window air conditioning units within the classroom are not capitally eligible. The only air conditioning units that are the larger split systems that are put into public assembly spaces such as the auditorium, the gymnasium, or the cafeteria. Library books are not eligible. Loose furniture, desk chairs, cafeteria tables, bookshelves are not eligible unless they are part of a larger construction project like a library upgrade or a classroom upgrade or a science lab upgrade. Copiers are not capitally eligible. Software alone, software is not eligible. Toner cartridges, and this program does not fund staffing or after-school programs. About Resolution A projects. So project budgets are set by the amount funded by the elected official. So the elected official determines this up and leading up till the adoption in July 1st. At that point, if a project is underfunded, the SEA and the school will discuss the options of moving forward with a reduced scope, or the school can attempt to secure additional funding to cover the estimated cost of the project. We will typically reach out with our architect and engineering team at that point and arrange a meeting with you to discuss those available options. SEA managed construction projects have a 25% soft cost applied to each construction project. This includes the scope, design, contingency, and the construction management costs. Ultimately, the New York City Office of Management and Budget releases the funding to the School Construction Authority. This is not funding that you will actually see in your Galaxy account budget. And larger projects such as athletic fields can be funded over multiple fiscal years. So if if a council member or borough president decides to fund an athletic field, you can provide you $500,000 over a 3-year period. You could build that amount of money to achieve the renovation or construction project that you're looking to achieve. Some general budget timelines. January to March, elected officials typically contact schools to identify the projects they like to fund. May through June, city budget negotiations and adoption of the city's budget. proceeds at that time. July 1st is the start of the actual new fiscal year. By the summer, schools are notified by the borough president's office or the council members regarding their award that they received for the fiscal year. This current fiscal year is fiscal year 2024. You would have received that notification this past summer. Um, July to September, the SEA reviews and creates the newly funded school projects internally. September through February, the SEA receives final budget authorization from the Office of Management and Budget. Those are called the certificate to proceeds. So once we receive that authorization, we notify the appropriate project teams, and then generally you'll see a project team reach out to you in January, February, or March of the subsequent year to arrange a scope meeting with you to discuss your project priorities. Um, Up here on the slide, you'll see the average cost and time frame estimates for projects. These are the low to high ranges. The low end is generally the cost for a public school. The high end, you'll see, is generally a high school cost. These are some of the typical projects that are funded, and then the average months for delivery after release of the funds is to the right of that. So that, we list out those projects, and we're going to share this presentation afterwards so that you can review this as well. But if you need a specific cost estimate, as Ashton mentioned, you can reach out to Brian, myself, and we have another counterpart, Macis, who will be able to address any questions on costs. And then, same with this slide. These are the average costs and time frame estimates for science labs, playgrounds, security cameras, mobile science carts, and culinary arts rooms, which are some of the projects that are funded by schools. So, like I said earlier, obtaining a project estimate, we're happy to help you come up with an estimate. Generally, when you reach out to us, we'll ask you what the scope of work is, and then we'll follow up in an official email with what the potential cost of that project would be. We ask that you only seek an estimate from the SCA for construction projects. We ask that you also prioritize components of your projects. So, if it includes chairs, if you would like curtains, we need all that specific information to come up with that cost. And then also you could look on FAMIS for technology pricing, which we could reference that. And don't ask any, we ask that you don't ask any other sources for estimates as well. So co-located schools and the Reso 8 grants, basically, in summary, if there is a co-located school that has a shared space like an auditorium, a gymnasium, or cafeteria, the grant is viewed as an upgrade to the entire building. So in that case, all building principals are involved in the process of and decision making on how the actual project moves forward, and all principals must approve the final project overall. When a Reso A allocation is made for technology, that grant is specifically for that individual organization. And this also just stresses the importance of, when we speak with the schools and about your particular grant, we always ask you to just verify your building ID, your org ID, which allows us to, specifically address the school within the school's needs. So you'll find that we request that information quite often, and that would help us out a lot. That kind of goes in line with what I was basically saying before. There are multiple schools within certain campuses, so it is important to have the building and org ID. Here we just provide an example of Jamaica High School, has generally the same building ID but multiple org IDs, and that's important for us to differentiate the school. Similarly, certain schools have multiple locations. Below is an example of a special education school, multiple Q009, and then obviously you see that there are multiple addresses, and the only way we differentiate that is by the building ID located where my cursor is. So Reso A changes. If council members or borough president can, you can make changes generally to the grant. when the budget is adopted, it'll say you adopt the budget and you have a $500,000 grant for the auditorium, and you basically determine that you no longer need the funding for the auditorium. You like to upgrade a science lab. Generally, the process is set forth where you reach out to us, then we have to reach out to the council member or the borough president that actually funded the project. We have to get their approval. And then if it is an actual change, generally we have to just confer with the office management budget on that change, and then we would officially update our records. Changes between construction, mobile STEM carts, and other technology require OMB approval, as I said, and resubmitting projects for a new CP. This change will add about 1 to 3 months to a project timeline. So just keep that in mind. These are just some examples of some completed projects that we've had at the Bushwick Educational Campus, cafeteria upgrade, and at PS21 in Brooklyn for an auditorium upgrade. Here are the point of contacts for all the Reso A grant questions. Brian McGinn, Masis Sarkisian, and myself, John Seltzer. As I said earlier, we're going to circulate this presentation afterwards, so you'll have all of our contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us with any project-specific questions or cost estimates. We're very happy to help you with any of those questions. And I will now open up the floor to any questions. If you have any, I believe Astrid will facilitate that, and we'll answer those questions for you.
Thank you, John. So yeah, we're going to move on now to the Q&A portion of our session. As I mentioned earlier, if we don't get to every question, we will be sending out an FAQ with an FAQ packet with all the questions and answers to them. So I just had Zenaida share her screen. She's been keeping track of all the questions that were either included in the RSVP or were placed into the chat throughout the presentation. So the first question we have here is the BP going to award any funding this year, or will it be the same as last year when all the funding went to one project? So yes, he will be awarding funding to school this year. We're going to follow the same process as last year, go the traditional way versus what happened during the first year in office. You can go to the next one, Zenaida. How do you determine which school qualifies for funding and how much funding? Do you work with a CEC in the decision making? So this question is a little difficult to answer. It's really the BP's discretion. As I mentioned during the presentation, in the last year, and this will be the approach for this year, trying to allocate funding to schools in every district and kind of spread the funding all around the borough. You can go to the next one. Yeah. Do we need to submit quotes and bids for the requested projects when applying? If so, how can we go about obtaining said quotes and bids? So I think this was answered during the presentation as well. Please be sure to reach out to the SCA, get a cost estimate. But when you apply, we don't need to see the quotes that you've received. Will you send us the link to the application once it? Yes, we will be sending once it becomes available. We will be sending it out to everyone. It'll be posted on our website, and then our staff here will also have the link on our signature lines. Is there a cap on funding or on the number of projects funded? No, the cap is really dependent on how much money our office receives as a whole, but we don't particularly put a cap on the number of projects. Fabrication lab. John, I think this might be for you. I saw this question come up when you were describing the types of projects.
Yeah, if the teacher or principal that asked that, if they could briefly elaborate on that, we'd be happy to address that question.
And that whoever did ask the question, let me just check who it was. And can you check who asked that question? That way we can have them elaborate on that.
Astrid, it was Enrique Garcia.
Okay. Enrique, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, the question is from Transit Tech?
No, I'm sorry, the one about the fabrication lab.
Okay,
They just
alright,
typed in fabrication lab with a question mark.
thank you.
Do we have Enrique here? Okay, well, we'll come back to that. So Transit Tech CTE received an award for fiscal year 21, and we have yet to receive the materials requested. The process with the integrator has been extremely challenging. Is there anyone in the Borough President's office who can assist? John, is this more a question for you? I might think this is speaking more to like the process after the award has been
Right.
issued.
Right. Yeah, we would be happy to, we'll follow up on this after the presentation and get you the information that you need on that award.
Thank you.
Yep.
What about playgrounds? Yes, playgrounds can be funded through this through capital funding. Yes. If we received a partial grant for a bathroom upgrade, can you apply to upgrade the remaining bathrooms? Yes, so long as the cost meets the minimum requirement, yes, you can apply to upgrade the bathrooms that are remaining. John, I think this one's for you. In terms of estimate assistance, does the SDA make a visit to the school to view and discuss scope?
Yeah, so what we'll typically do is we'll reach out to the school. We'll ask you for the scope of work. Also, if you have any pictures of the space that you're looking to upgrade, that is good first start. And a lot of the time, that is enough information for us to derive a cost estimate. So an actual physical visit at first is not necessary.
If you win a participatory budgeting grant from your council member, is it unlikely or impossible that you will also get a RESO grant from the Borough President's office in the same year? No, they're not. They're separate and apart, so you can still obtain a separate grant from our office. If you have been previously awarded for technology, can we apply again? Yes, you can. As I mentioned earlier, if it's a priority or a need that your school still has, then yes, you can apply for another technology award. We received RESO 8 funding for fiscal year 23 and opted to use that funding to add additional cameras to our school community. We have not been able to receive any correspondence from SDA to confirm that they have received the RESO 8 funding and that we will receive the cameras. How do we garner assistance with this issue?
Yeah, so we will follow up on that particular project and reach out to you and give you an update on the cameras.
And we can, John, I can let you know which school asked the question.
Great, thank you.
Each year, I am contacted by our usual technology vendor to let us know what our RESO allocation is for a given year. We do not apply for this, we just receive it. I am assuming this is different from what we are discussing, which is more construction SDA related. Both are referred to as RESO 8, though. Can you provide any insight? As far as I know, I mean, John, please correct me, but the allocation, I don't know what other source it would have come from if it was not from our office through this program or from a council member's office.
Yeah, sometimes there are some state grants that schools receive. They may
Okay.
be referring to that. If there is a state grant of any sort, you just have to reach out to the RESO contacts, Brian, myself, and Massis, and we will figure out, what the scope of work is for that. But generally, any type of technology through the RESO grant program is facilitated through our furniture and equipment department in the SEA, and then they work with an integrator that will reach out to the school and figure out your technology needs.
Thank you, John. Next question. We received $400,000 for an electrical upgrade for fiscal year 22. They came in December 2022 to survey the classrooms. However, we have not heard from them and have not received the upgrade. Who should we reach out to?
Yes, so we will follow up on that particular project as well. If Asher, if you could just forward me that information from the school. Yeah.
Of course. Would this apply to cafeteria appliances, fridge and ovens? As far as I know, these are not eligible items unless what, John? I'm not sure, honestly.
Yeah. So if you are in fact upgrading the cafeteria space, like the kitchen in the cafeteria, those accompanying items can be included as part of the project, but as standalone items, they are not.
Can Reso A funds be used to turn a single space use into a multi-use? So for example, an auditorium into an auditorium / gym.
Yes. Yeah. Basically, if you receive the funding and it's earmarked for a room conversion or a particular space, you can turn spaces into other types of spaces. So it could be a multi-purpose space, it could be an auditorium space, however you want to convert it. I would say that those projects do have certain limitations that we would have to examine to determine the certificate of occupancy, if there are any limitations there. There also might be some structural issues that we have to see if there are partitions, but it is a possibility to convert those rooms. Yes.
How long does it take for the SCA to provide estimates for projects?
So if you reach out to us, we will have to look into. It might be as simple as, if you reach out to us, a hydroponics lab generally costs between approximately $185,000. So we would be able to tell you that fairly quickly. If it's a more extensive project, there are certain conditions that we'll have to review in terms of site plans. I would say generally within a week or week and a half, we could get back to you.
Before we continue, I do see there is a hand up, and I do want to allow the person to ask the question before we continue with the questions that were listed in the chat. I think there's a G. Carol that has a question.
How are you? Greg Coral from PS 101. How does this work in terms of in conjunction with class size reduction? Meaning the whole law that's going into effect. So if I take an instructional space and turn it into a STEM lab through a Reso A grant, am I going to lose that space in 2 or 3 years? Or does that room now become something that's separate from a regular instructional classroom? Sorry.
Yeah, I would say let us follow up with you on that particular item, and we can discuss that after the presentation. I'll
Thank
have
you.
Astrid reach out with the contact information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we can go back to the chat questions. Yeah. So now that you're sharing your screen, there we go. Oh, okay, let me just open up the chat here. So now this having some. Oh, here we go. Okay. So for a technology grant, can it be a few items such as document cameras and Chromebooks and adapters and mounting of interactive flat panels, or should it be for just one specific item?
Yeah, I would say, the grant has to at minimum be 50,000 or more. This applies for technology as well. And we like to keep, the items very similar. So if you are looking to purchase something for $50,000, we would recommend that you purchase $50,000 worth of computers, or it could be $50,000 worth of A+ STEM equipment. We generally like to keep it in one category, but you can work with the integrator to have 2 different styles of laptops. I mean, that's just a conversation you would have, once the integrator reaches out to you. But keep it at least in the same family, like computers or STEM cards or things of that nature.
Has anyone navigated adding an addition or additional floor to a school? I've seen model classrooms and site additions. Is it through this office? I haven't seen a request come in since I've been in office, but John, is that something that is possible?
Adding an addition to a school is would in my time, I personally have not seen that. If Brian is on the call, yeah.
Yeah. In addition, it's Brian again, is something that would be addressed through the SEA's capital plan. And that would be determined based on the current capacity of your building and the demographics of the neighborhood that you live in. But it's certain, you're talking about a $50 million project, which would not be funded through ResOA.
Okay, next question. Good afternoon. I see that the installation of elevators were not mentioned. Can we request an elevator installation?
So
I'll take this one, John, unfortunately. Okay. Again, at something like an elevator is an extensive project that will cost into the multiple millions, most likely trigger fire alarm work. So it is determined through the Department of Education's ADA committee which schools will receive full accessibility projects through the SEA's capital plan. But again, it's not something that would be funded through the ResOA program.
So if we ask for 20,000 and your office can't do the 20,000, would we be offered a lesser amount? Unfortunately, no. The minimum, as we've mentioned during the presentation, has to be $50,000 that is requested and could be awarded from our office. 231, same thing. We have a 2022 capital award. Emails are slow between the team. Currently, we are waiting for next step. Next steps, typically, how long should we wait to hear back from the team? I'm assuming this is for the SDA.
yeah, so again, we will follow up on these particular projects that all the school principals or staff reached out on, and we'll be sure to give you an update both by email, or we might even call for a meeting. So.
If we want to request materials to create media STEM labs such as virtual reality headsets, robots, 3D printers, and they are not on shop to DOE, does SDA provide prices for that, or are we on our own to get quotes for those types of items?
So we do have a catalog through our furniture and equipment department at the School Construction Authority that has, virtual reality headsets, robots, 3D printers. We would be happy to share that with you as well. Just keep in mind there will be an updated catalog being disseminated in like the next couple weeks for the new year. Yeah, we would have those costs in that catalog.
May requests include rooftop hydroponics or gym? Yes, they can.
And yeah.
Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, generally I would say with the roof spaces as well, that's just another conversation whether there's a closed structure on the roof or the load bearing of the roof, and then accessibility to the roof. These could be very costly projects as well. So just keep in mind if you are doing a hydroponics lab, generally we like to keep those in the actual school, but a separate conversation would be a rooftop, or that would be a totally separate conversation in terms of cost, which could be quite costly overall. Yeah.
Are we able to upgrade water fountains?
Yes. So generally water fountains are approximately it's approximately $8,000 each. So you would have to upgrade at least 6 water fountains in the school to be capitally eligible. But they are capitally eligible, yes.
We have applied and received funding the past few years. We've been putting that money aside for a library upgrade until we have the total that's needed. Can we continue to do this? John, is there a time cap on, how many years a school can accumulate these funds for?
So there's no time cap. If the school would like to, as I said in the presentation, if there's a large project, a large upgrade, and you're incrementally building it year over year, you can do so. That is also, that's up to your discretion how you like to proceed. So if you ask for 500,000, 500,000, 500,000 over a 3-year period, you have $1.5 million to upgrade a library eventually, or another space within the school. You could do that.
You mentioned cooling systems and public assembly areas. Would that include an auditorium that has no windows?
Yes, so the public assembly space, air conditioning, well, split system upgrades. So those are for auditoriums, gymnasiums, and cafeterias. Has no bearing, if it has windows or not. These are generally provided through duct units that are to the roof or another area, exiting the school. But yes.
If a project is $300,000, but can be broken up to be smaller if need be, can we indicate this? For example, multi-floor electrical upgrade can become a single floor or fewer floors.
So we do electrical upgrades. You can, if you have a $300,000 grant, at minimum, the electrical upgrade would have to be $50,000 per space. But that is a project that we do have through the ResOA grant program. So yes, you can have multiple floors for the electrical upgrade.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the question. I'm saying, like, can we, I know that $300,000 might be a larger amount, and I don't want it to be too large to ask for. So is there a way on the application I can say this project can be broken up into increments if we need it to be? So like only the 5th floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the process. If you apply for funding, when we initially come out, you can say, well, I'd really like to do the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. And we may come back to you and say, listen, you only have enough money to do the 5th floor. And then that's, that dialogue happens, and that's how we determine, the scope. So certainly you can ask for the world, and then we'll tell you what you can actually afford.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, Zenaida? Trust for Public Land is renovating our schoolyard. They have said that they would like to ask for money from the Borough President's office to supplement. How do we go about putting in a request for this? So I would say that the request would have to come directly from the school, unless the school, and John, please correct me, the school is not owned by the DOE, correct? Or is not a city property?
And Brian, do you want to chime in on that? Trust for Public Land.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we obviously we partner with the Trust for Public Land on many projects. A lot of the time, they'll take the lead on reaching out to elected officials to secure funding. They only work on, when partnering with us, they only work on Department of Education facilities. So it wouldn't be any kind of private, school or private charter school. It would be a DOE building. And, they work with us and DEP on securing funding for these projects. So you can reach out to us individually, and we'll connect you with Trust for Public Land to make sure that all the appropriate funding is being secured.
Okay, wonderful. And it's another one. So how are projects prioritized for funding? Are there criteria for which projects get funded, or any tips to increase our odds to get accepted? I would say that most importantly, it's making sure that your application is filled out correctly. As I mentioned earlier, the Borough President does not have a particular focus our area of focus for this year, but we did have a couple of schools last year that unfortunately we couldn't move forward with, just because the applications were incomplete. So that's very important, and just make sure all the information is there. And again, reach out also to your council members' offices. It is not to say that our office would not solely fund the project, but especially on the larger scale projects, it is likely that we'll reach out to the council members' offices and partner on those projects or co-fund them. Okay, I think that was the last question. Is there any other questions before we close out here?
We have put in a few requests, and I find in general, maybe I'm not finding it, but we don't get a response, yes or no. So I'm wondering, is there some feedback that you get?
Is this in terms of after you apply and the capital cycle closes? So we generally don't send out notifications to schools saying you were not awarded any funding. We generally just tell the schools that are receiving funding. There are schools that do reach out to us during the process for a status, and we do tell them, if there was no funding awarded to the school during the year. So if you do apply and don't hear from us, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
We have, if our school requests funding for multiple learning labs, should we include all lab requests together on one application if the costs do not exceed the minimum of $50,000? John, is that something that they can do for multiple labs?
So the project itself, if it's a physical improvement to a space, at minimum has to be $50,000. So you can do multiple learning labs, and you can apply through the Borough President's Office for multiple learning labs. However, each of those spaces at minimum would have to be a $50,000 construction project.
Okay, so I think that's it. Again, on behalf of our office, the Borough President, we'd like to thank you all for attending and for your continued work and advocacy on behalf of our Brooklyn students. Also like to thank our partners at the SEA, John and Brian, for joining us, and to the team at our office for making this all possible and putting this together. And as our VP would say, keep spreading love. It's the Brooklyn way. Hope you all have a safe and happy holidays. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great one. Thank you so much.